Okay, good morning and welcome to this Licensing and Gambling Subcommittee being held on Thursday, the 28th of April, 2022. My name's Councillor Walter Williams and I'm chairing this meeting this morning. This meeting is being held remotely via Microsoft Teams due to restrictions in relation to COVID-19. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available to view via the Council's website, except for discussions involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images and audio of these individuals present or speaking will be publicly available to view to all via the recording on the Council website at www.caerphilly.gov.uk. I will now carry out the roll call for attendance. Please can you announce yourself as present when I call out your name? Members first, please. Councillor Mike Adams.
Present, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Donna Cushing.
Present, Chair.
Morning. Can I check the following officers are present, please? Lee Morgan, Licensing Manager.
Yeah, good morning, Chair. Present.
Catherine Hopkins, Senior Licensing Officer.
Yeah, morning, Chair. Present.
Todd Rawson, Solicitor.
Present, Chair.
Rebecca Barrett, Committee Services Officer.
As a chair.
Okay. Please can I check the applicant is present, Miss Bridget Lewis, Tog Farm?
Yes, present.
Thank you. I also have a list of responsible authorities and other persons, local residents speaking at the meeting. Please announce yourself as present when I call out your name. Dean Pugh, Environmental Health and Safety.
Present, Chair.
Lorraine Hayworth, Environmental Health and Safety.
Present, Chair.
Annette Dix, Licensing as a responsible authority.
Present, Chair.
Christian Jennings, Environmental Health, Pollution Control.
Present, Chair.
And Tim Kehan, Trading Standards.
Morning, Chair. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Barbara Jones.
She's not in attendance, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Christine Forehead. Councillor Elaine Forehead.
Someone has just attempted to join us by telephone, Chair, so that could very well be one of the elected members now. Just give us a moment, Chair.
Okay, I'll carry on. Mr. Jenkins, local resident.
Present, Chair.
Mrs. Garland, local resident.
Present, Chair.
Mr. Garland, local resident.
He won't be attending.
Okay, thank you. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, local residents.
Present, Chair, using telephone link.
Okay. Can I also welcome supporting officers from Licensing and Committee Services who are present in the background? Thank you all for confirming your attendance. Please can I remind attendees that if they lose connection during the meeting, please make every attempt to connect. However, the meeting will continue as long as the meeting is quorate. Committee services are on hand and will be able to assist you to reconnect if necessary. Please can I ask everyone to keep their microphones on mute until they are invited to speak. I will also remind everyone that the chair has a discretion to remove persons from the remote meeting if that is necessary. If you wish to speak, please use the hands up function in Microsoft Teams. We now move to the agenda. There's apologies for absence. The apologies for absence from Deborah Lewis, Child Protection. Declarations of interest. Councillors and officers are reminded of the personal responsibility to declare any personal or prejudicial interests in respect of any item of business on this agenda in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and a Code of Conduct on both councillors and officers. Please use the hands up function to indicate if you have any such declarations. I see one hand up.
Yes, Chair, it's me, Councillor Donna Cushing. Just to let you know that one of the attendees and I belong to the same political party, and so I have to make you aware of that. However, we do not belong to the same branch of that party.
Councillor Cushing, so what you're saying is that in your electorate, if I call that a ward area, the other party member is not resident there?
Oh, no. We just belong to the same political party. We, sorry?
Not involved in your selection to run for candidacy or anything like that?
Oh, no, definitely not.
Do you socialise together?
No, we don't socialise. We've been to some political rallies together, but we don't socialise.
Okay, thank you. Chair, I wouldn't say that's a conflict.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you then, Todd.
Okay, thanks very much. Agenda item 3, determination of premises license application, Tog Farm Limited, land at Tog Farm, Rudry. Mr. Rawson from legal, can I hand over to you, please?
Thank you, Chair. Before members consider the matter before them, I will firstly run through the procedure that will be followed for the meeting. The procedure that will be followed today is that firstly, the licensing manager will present his report. All parties will then have the opportunity to ask questions of the licensing manager regarding the information in the report. Mrs. Lewis, the premises applicant, will then be asked to address the subcommittee in support of her application. All parties will then have the opportunity to ask questions of the applicant. Each responsible authority will then be asked to address the subcommittee in support of their representations. All parties will then have the opportunity to ask questions of each responsible authority. Each local ward member will then be asked to address the subcommittee in support of their representations. All parties will then have the opportunity to ask questions of each local ward member. Each of the other persons, so the local residents, will then be asked to address the subcommittee in support of their representations, and all parties will then have the opportunity to ask questions of each of the local residents. All parties will then have the opportunity to sum up. Please note that this should be a summary of any information that you've already provided to the committee, and no new information shall be introduced at that time. Please can I ask that if you do not clearly hear a question or response, that you ask the person speaking if they can repeat what they have said. If you lose connection, we will pause proceedings, so please make every effort to reconnect in the meantime. If you have difficulty reconnecting, please contact Community Services on 077 14 60912. Once all parties have summed up, the Chair will then ask the parties to leave the meeting through the hang up or leave button on the Teams interface, and the decision of the subcommittee will be circulated by the licensing department within 5 working days of this meeting. That is the procedure for the meeting. If anyone has any questions regarding those procedures, can they please indicate using the hands up function now? Chair, I can't see any hands raised, so I'll pass back to you.
Thank you, legal. Can I hand over now to Mr. Lee Morgan from licensing, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, and can I welcome all parties to this Licensing and Gambling Subcommittee meeting. This meeting is in relation to an application for a new premises licence under the Licensing Act 2003, which has been made by Tog Farm Limited for land at Tog Farm in Rudry. The applicant will address you later in relation to their application in the meeting. But Chair, first of all, could I take the opportunity to highlight to you paragraph 1.1 of the report, which highlights that a premises can be for any place, and this includes open space and not necessarily a building, which members may be more familiar with, in their dealings in their role as subcommittee members. The application and licensable activities sought by this application is detailed at paragraph 1.3. Essentially, these are the sale of alcohol on the premises between Monday to Sunday from 3 p.m. till 11 p.m. and for regulated entertainment in the form of the provision of or showing of film between Monday and Sunday from 6 p.m. until 11 p.m. Paragraph 1.31 of the report sets out the steps that have been volunteered by the applicant, Tog Farm Limited, and are reproduced directly from the application that's been submitted to the licensing team. Members will note, but by virtue of this information provided by the applicant, they have effectively limited their total number of persons on site for the sale of alcohol and provision of film to a maximum of 10 persons. The application, like all others for a premises license, are subject to a 28-day consultation period, during which time responsible authorities and other persons, including residents, elected members and businesses, can make representations. Those representations can either be in support of or objecting to the application that's been made. During the 28-day period, site visits were made by a number of the responsible authorities, and you'll see in the report bundle between pages 19 to 24 the site obviously that they visited. Two of the responsible authorities, as you've seen referenced in the report, namely the Fire and Rescue Service and police, indicated that following their visits that they had no representations in respect of this application. Representations have been received from the Child Protection Officer, Trading Standards and Environmental Health Pollution. Those officers are recommending or advocating conditions, whereas objections to the application have been received from Environmental Health and Safety and the licensing authority in its role as a responsible authority. I would highlight that the Child Protection Officer has offered her apologies today, but you will hear from all other responsible authorities who will confirm their position to you later in this meeting. I can confirm that the applicant has agreed to the comments proposed by the Child Protection Officer, and those comments of the Child Protection Officer were indeed echoed by Trading Standards supporting the same. So, in addition to the representations from responsible authorities, there have been objections to this application, and they've been received from a number of residents and 3 elected members for the area. Furthermore, the Community Council for the area. The responses from the various responsible authorities or other persons or elected members, they're contained as a bit of a guide between paragraphs 1.51 to 1.52 of the report. A summary of the representations received from the responsible authorities and from local residents and elected members and the Community Council are contained at paragraph 1.6 of the report, and you find those between pages 4 and 7. I would point out that some of the residents have asked for their details to remain anonymous, but to provide some clarity as to one of the persons attending this morning, resident D is Mrs. J. Garland, and resident E, Mr. M. Garland, are those persons who have submitted those representations. All comments that have been submitted as part of the process are contained within your report bundle between pages 37 to 111. The comments and responses then made by the applicant, and the applicant being Tog Farm Limited, but primarily the applicant responses come from one of its directors, Miss Bridget Lewis, who was present this morning. She has responded to the comments of the Child Protection Officer and has agreed those comments, as I mentioned earlier on. In relation to the conditions proposed by Environmental Health Pollution, some of the comments then in terms of proposed conditions by Environmental Health and Safety and Licensing Authority, those have not been agreed or agreed to. However, you will note that at the moment, 2 of those responsible authorities maintain their objections to this application. The applicant responses to date, they're attached for your information, and you can find those then at Appendix 21, which is starting from page 113 of your bundle. The comments are summarised though between pages 7 and 8. The licensing assessment at paragraph 1.8 provides guidance to members on how you will determine this application this morning, and you will be having regard to the promotion of the licensing objectives, so namely the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. Members, you will have regard to the Licensing Act 2003, the statutory Home Office 182 guidance, and the Council's own licensing policy. The relevant extracts in relation to this application you can find in your bundle between pages 25 through to 36. Members, furthermore, you will consider all of the information that you will hear from all of the representatives present and the evidence that's submitted during this meeting this morning. Members, there are some officer observations contained in the report, and they start at paragraph 1.9, and you can find those between pages 9 and 13. As is a case with reports of this type, an officer recommendation is then included at paragraph 110. Chair, I plan to hand back to you in a second, because there may be some questions arising at this point. Some of these questions may be best directed to the applicant because she hasn't had the opportunity on behalf of the company to make an application yet, but there may be questions relevant which I can possibly try and address. I know members would have read the report and had a sight of the content, but what I'll do, Chair, if I hand back to you at this point, and then if there aren't any questions, and then obviously we can hand over and invite Ms Lewis on behalf of Tog Farm Limited to make her application. So, Chair, I come back to you at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you, licensing. Are there any questions for licensing? Please indicate now using hands up. Councillor Cushin, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Mr Morgan, I've got a query on 1.3 regarding regulated entertainment, and it says, but the films, would there be any other such entertainment? I know music, well, I can't do music festivals, I suppose, with 10 people, I don't know, you possibly could, but any other sort of entertainment? And the other question I've got for you, Mr Morgan, is regarding some people who objected wanted to remain anonymous. Is there a reason for that, can I ask?
Okay, if I take perhaps the first part first in relation to the licence and activity that's been applied for. The applicant has indicated that she wishes to apply, or on behalf of the company wishes to apply for the provision of film as the only regulated entertainment that has been applied for. The premises could, if a premises license is granted, it then would have some additional permissions, I suppose, that's permitted via the Licensing Act in terms of some activities where a license comes into effect. It's I suppose, quite difficult to perhaps sum up succinctly, but at the moment, the site could have live music at the site now because of some deregulated activity, only up until 11 o'clock and for less than 500 people. In this instance, for this application, the applicant has curtailed, obviously, was her activities to the provision of alcohol and film. If a license were to be granted, then the company would have the ability to provide still provide live, but then unrecorded music up until from 8 AM in the morning till 11 PM at night. So that's the first part. In relation to the second question, then in respect of persons who have expressed a desire to remain anonymous, yes, there were a number of requests made to the licensing authority for that to be the case. Each case is considered on its merits, and obviously if there are concerns or fears on behalf of those individuals, we will assess that and determine whether we feel that they can be admitted. And the comments, there are two of those residents who have not attended today, but wished for their comments to be submitted as part of this process. And they disclosed to the licensing authority their fears or potential repercussions should their identity be revealed to the applicant. That is obviously detailed. It's some of those comments are highlighted in the report, which you would have read already. But
Okay, thanks then, Mr. Morgan. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Adams, please.
Thank you, Chair. Some of the questions that you've now actually answered, Lee, for Donna. On the provision of the films, it only said it in a tent. Now, is this in the individual tents being occupied, or a tent specifically for the purpose of showing film? And is there anything that we need to think about with the classification of films shown?
okay. I'm sure the applicant will be able to assist you with some of that. But what I would say at this point is, Councillor Adams, is that my understanding is that the application is for the ability to provide films at 4 separate pods or glamping pods, which are that is, I believe, the company's application, as opposed to one central point where films would be shown. But I'm sure Ms. Lewis would be able to clarify that for you. And if obviously anything different, the responsible authorities who conducted the site visit, I'm sure will come back and let the pair of us know if it's anything different to what has been that they've been advised.
That's okay, Lee. I'm prepared to wait for when Ms. Lewis actually does her own applications presentation, rather than come in now and bounce around. So if she makes a note of that question, that would be great.
Okay. All right. Was there another part to your question? Sorry, I remember.
Any restrictions or what on the classification of any film shown?
Yes, sorry, yes. You would have seen contained within the representations, there are comments received from the Child Protection Officer, which are supported by the Trading Standards Officer. Again, these have been accepted, or say comments, they are proposed conditions should a license be granted, where the requisite responsible authorities have considered the films being shown, and the applicant has agreed, obviously, to effectively comply with the age restrictions of the showing of film then to the relevant persons. So you should not have an 18 film shown to a 12-year-old, for example.
That's okay, yeah. I could see that. It was just, I wanted confirmation, and that will come through in any presentation, hopefully.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Chair. There may well be other questions, obviously, coming through as different details come up in the report. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Mr. Morgan, I have a question. With regards, you said at the moment, the applicant could have 500 and below people in attendance on the field with live music. If this license was to be granted, would that facility be lost then?
No, Chair. It remains. So that if this license is granted, the applicant will still have the ability to have live music, because effectively live music has been deregulated and is permissible between the hours of 8 AM and 11 PM. in this instance, if a premises license were to be granted, the additional permission would afford the ability to have recorded music for the same time period. So between the hours of 8 and 11 p.m. What I would say is that doesn't give the applicant carte blanche to do what they wanted to do, because there are controls, you know, in relation to the entertainment which is played at, you know, at the level which is played and is controlled then by other requirements, for example, statutory noise nuisance. So those permissions, there would be one further permission that would be afforded to the applicant as a result of this application in relation to entertainment.
Thank you. Councillor Cushion, you have another question?
Yes, I do. Thanks, Chair. Mr. Morgan, just for clarity, with the licensing application, if it's granted, even though that they have these, they could have live music to up to 500, that doesn't mean that they would be able to serve alcohol to these 500, would it? Or is it just for the maximum of 10 people?
The applicant has curtailed herself to on her operating schedule to a number of persons, a maximum number of persons at any one time, and you would have seen that on the. I think it's detailed on within paragraph 1.31, where there'll be no more than 10 guests at any one time. So that's what the applicant has asked for in her application.
Okay, I just wanted clarity that if there was a festival held on this venue, that there wouldn't be any alcohol served to the attendees, I should say, at that festival or whatever. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Mike Adams again, please.
Yeah, and following Councillor Cushion's question there about the sale of alcohol, how about any control on people visiting the site bringing their own?
Okay, slightly different matter. If there is no, the people bringing their own alcohol would not constitute a licensable activity. You know, it would be certainly for the applicant to control. You know, what we're dealing with effectively today is an application by the applicant to have the provision of the sale of alcohol and to show films for up to 10 guests at any one time. Technically, you know, there's no, we as a licensing authority, we can't control bring your own, if people bring their own sort of alcohol onto the site. That's something that the Licensing Act controls. There may be other controls which will, if there were behaviour arising from that, deal with that issue. But the Licensing Act itself would not control that.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Lee. I just wanted to clear that one up. It's a matter of self-discipline and yeah, okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands up. Thank you very much. So now we'll go to Mrs. Lewis, please, for your representation.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Loud and clear.
Yes, that's great. Yeah, okay, so just to touch on those points and the questions. So in terms of other activities, I think it's imperative that I get across that obviously we are a new business. We started operating last year, and we've certainly, like any new business, made mistakes, done things wrong, done things right. So the aim, and one of the main reasons we put in this licensing application now, is to obviously regulate what we're doing and to have a sustainable business. So in terms of other activities, there won't be any other activities. The only activity or entertainment we are seeking is for the provision of films. In terms of which tents they will be in, so all of our guests are pre-booked. We have all of their information, date of birth, so we know their ages. They will then, if they did want to have a film, it would be within their own tent, not amplified with, I think I've sent the actual details of the projector and speaker to Christian. just a standard projector speaker, not something that's amplified, and they would be contained in their own tents. In terms of the timings for those, the only reason that we've put it up until 11 o'clock would be obviously if somebody wanted to watch a film at 9 o'clock, it would finish at 11 o'clock. So yeah, they wouldn't be one large tent, they would all be in separate tents. In terms of the age restrictions, obviously all of our guests pre-book, we know the ages of everybody, so we would know what we'd be able to show or not. Obviously it seems to be a concern with the 500 guests. That's exactly what we're trying to get away from. Obviously last year we did have large events, and when we originally started we had a DJ, which caused, you know, a tremendous amount of problems. That's not the route we're going down. The route that we're trying to go down now is to have 4 pods, which are basically more of an experience, so it can be profitable for us, and to allow us not to or not to have like a large amount of people. The reason we're looking now for 10 people maximum is for people still to have a bit of a get together, and obviously control the alcohol. Obviously if there's no license granted, we can revert back to the bring your own alcohol, but as I've expressed to everybody in the licensing department, that's just proved, as you can imagine, a lot more problematic than you know, than it's worth. So in terms of the license, I think I really want to get through that all I want to be able to do, we want to be able to do, is if it's somebody's birthday, offer them a bottle of Prosecco within their tent. Our business plan now has changed to be more confined, with 4 glamping pods, a maximum of 10 at any one time, and more of a luxury experience rather than what we have done in the past, you know, large events, which has been problematic. And obviously we have made mistakes in terms of noise nuisance, so we've just been finding our way. So I think I've covered everybody's questions there.
You're on mute, Chair.
No.
Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Yeah. Are there any questions for the applicant, please? And I did see Councillor Cushion had her hand up.
I've still got my hand up, Chair. Right. Sorry, Mrs. Lewis, is it Mrs. Lewis, Bridget?
Miss Lewis.
Miss Lewis. Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, Miss Lewis. Just a couple of quick questions. How many pods do you, how many people do your pods hold as a maximum? And what's to prevent, even though you might offer this service of, say, a bottle of Prosecco in people's pod or whatever to celebrate his birthday, what's sort of really to prevent them from bringing their own anyway? And just a quick third question. Do you have Wi-Fi connection to the pods? Because people could, you know, watch Netflix, or if they have Netflix, and connect to your Wi-Fi anyway, couldn't they? Rather than having projector and screen, etc.
Yeah, so in terms of the tents, the actual tents that we purchase, they can slip up to a maximum of 10 per tent. Obviously the route that we're going down is more of a luxury route, so those tents only have a double bed in them, so the maximum capacity would be 2 adults, or 2 adults and 2 children inside them. In terms of stopping people bringing their own alcohol, we have a very close relationship with all of the guests. Like, obviously we're a very small business. It's myself and my father that run the business, so I personally speak to everybody. So in terms of, there's a lot of trust involved. Obviously I don't stop and search everybody that comes onto the property, but we've got you know, I wish I could pictures. If you see the way that the tents are left, there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of respect there. The only other thing in terms of the alcohol license would be, at the moment we're offering like pizza night. So for example, tonight we've got it's an anniversary, they're having some pizzas, and they would like to have had a bottle of Prosecco. Obviously we're not able to do that, so they are bringing their own tonight. But as I said, we're getting away from the whole sort of festival, like, you know, let's just go into a field and just drink as much as we can. So then the other question, no, we don't have Wi-Fi. So what we do, what we plan to do with the films is it would be pre-booked, pre-downloaded, and then we would go down, set it up for them. So it would only be that film that they'd be able to watch. They wouldn't be able to watch, you know, a copious amount of films. They wouldn't be able to watch, you know, films until the night.
Okay, lovely, thanks.
It's okay.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Adams, please.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Lewis, you mentioned a double bed for 2 adults, up to 2 children. So does your maximum of 10 actually be, is that the number of adults, and they could have another 4, 5 or 6 children set amongst the whole group, or is it 10 including children?
For the alcohol license is 10. For the license for the planning, we've based on 2 adults and 2 children. Obviously, that would then depend in terms of the restrictions of the ages. They wouldn't be able to watch films if they obviously had children with them.
Okay, yeah. That's okay. Just wanted to check that out, because you could therefore have 2 adults, 2 children in your 4 tents, and you'd still have 16, but only 8 of those would be adults,
Yeah.
possibly 8. But yeah, anyway, those kind of little mechanical complications that can,
Yeah.
I'm sure, would be part of any flexibility that might accompany the application going through if it does. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I have, Councillor Morgan. Mr. Lee Morgan, please.
Chair, I don't know if I was next. I do apologise, but just very briefly picking up on the conversation there, I would bring members back to the application that's been made for this premises licence, which it says that there will be no more than 10 guests at any one time. And I would just highlight that the 2 regimes for licensing and planning are separate and distinct. And the maximum number would be the finite number, i.e. 10 guests, which in my view would include children potentially. So I think it's just there's no misunderstanding perhaps in terms of numbers. So the 2 processes, you know, this is a licensing act premises license hearing. Obviously it's separate, completely separate from any other hearing for planning. So just making that point just for members' clarity, really. And I do apologise if I'd come in before another speaker. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks so much. I have a question, Ms. Lewis.
Yeah.
How many people are actually employed on this site?
So there's 4 employees at the moment.
Plus yourself and your father as directors.
Oh no,
right?
that's not including myself and my father.
Yeah, and you've got toilets and shower.
Yes,
those facilities.
we have we've gone down the route of compost toilets. Last year we were using chemical portaloos, which obviously aren't very nice. So we've gone down the route of compost toilets. Obviously they've got their benefits in terms of environment, and then we've got showers and hot running and cold water down there as well.
Okay, yeah. With regards to first aid, are there any employees trained in first aid?
Yeah, so myself and my father are, and then one of our employees who also works for British Airways, so she's first aid trained and to a very high standard.
Thank you. I do see one hand up, but I don't know who it is.
Chair, it's Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you have a question, please?
Oh, good morning, Chair. Yes, I have a question for Bridget. Referring to the aerial maps on page 17 of the pack, we have only recently had sight of these images, but we can make the following observations. We want to ask the question, why does the area within the red outline on those maps contain 2 of our fields? The area of these fields is approximately 5 acres.
Oh, sorry, let me just get that. that one up.
Just retire. Just go to freezer.
Oh, that's the aerial view that we've got there, which is highlighted in red. So you can see that the two pods are in the bottom two fields. Obviously, they aren't in your fields. I'm sure you'd be aware if we had pods.
There seems to be some feedback from somewhere. Oh, right, seems to have gone there.
Yeah, I think Mr. Smith have a problem there. You trying to come back in, I think.
Yes, Chair. I believe Mr. and Mrs. Smith back in the meeting now. They lost connection for a moment.
Are you there now,
Oh,
Mr. Smith?
sorry about that, Chair. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Like I said, we just recently had sight of the plans, but we note that the plan, the aerial view, contains two of our fields, because of course we are the neighbouring property. The field are approximately 5 acres of land, and of course we do not want our fields included in the alcohol application.
Yeah.
Did you hear the answer from Mrs. Lewis? Or did you lose connection?
Sorry, we did lose connection.
Mr. Lewis, if you can explain again, please.
Yes, sorry. So that aerial view there with the red outline, I think is a very brief outline that I think I outlined whilst we had the licensing authorities out on the farm. Obviously, we've included within our planning permission and the licensing, the actual deed, so there won't be any confusion as to whose fields are what. Obviously, there's no pods on anybody's fields apart from ours.
Okay, Mr. Smith?
Yes.
The second
We also note that the second aerial photograph doesn't show the neighbouring properties in relation to what is, I believe, the Elders field. It doesn't give a very clear representation at all of that view.
Right. Okay. I don't really understand your question.
Sorry, Chair,
about the
could I come in at this
Mr.
point?
Morgan, yes, please.
Yeah. What I would say at this point is that the photographs in Appendix 2, certainly the lower photograph, which has been provided by the licensing authority, just to perhaps provide some further clarity as to roughly the area and what's around it and some of the buildings within it. So that hasn't been provided by the applicant. That's been provided by the licensing authority. And that would be the aerial shot is one from 2017 as the latest that we could have. So that might provide an indication as to any absence of any information on there, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. So it's something that we've provided, not the applicant.
That's satisfying.
No.
Mm.
Okay, Mr. Smith, you understand that answer?
Sorry, Chair, we're having problems with the
you're
the
breaking up.
microphone.
Yeah, you're breaking up. Yeah.
We'll see.
You.
We'll see if we can rejoin on the mobile.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Mr. Rawson, please.
I'm just thinking, Chair, should we pause just to wait for Mr. and Mrs. Smith to rejoin?
Okay, yeah, see what happens. Mr. Smith, are you back in?
Yes, we can hear you now, and I'm reconnected as well on the mobile. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Lewis, if I take you to page 15, which contains the plan of the premises, you've got the horse box as the on sale for alcohol, and then you've got the film area and the glamping pods in site 2, which is the oldest field.
Yeah.
What will the boundary of the actual premises be?
In terms of the sale of alcohol.
No, you've applied for a premises license.
Oh, right. Okay. So it was quite obviously difficult to do because we're trying to get down the route of being like self-service. So with the horse box, what appendix did you say that was? Sorry, I'm just trying to get it.
It's appendix 1 on page 15. It's the map of the
Right, yeah, I've got it.
yeah.
So so where you see the horse box in the car park, the idea obviously is that if they did want to have any alcohol, it would either be bought within a package if we were granted the license, and then it would be given to them that designation, and then taken down to the field when we check them in. Obviously, we don't want by any means people just walking up. We don't want to be an open bar, so to speak, where people can just come in and purchase alcohol. So they are two separate fields, but the licensable area for the alcohol would only be at the top of the car park. And then obviously people could buy the alcohol there, it would be taken down, and then obviously we would not need to be there, obviously, in terms of staffing costs and whatnot. We don't want to have somebody there for the duration of somebody's stay. I think it's worth mentioning as well, sorry, slightly off topic, but the reason that we've put the alcohol, the timings quite as broad as we have done is just for people checking in and out. So we have tried to constrain it so people are checking in between 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. But obviously, if they're traveling from far and they're not checking in until 9 p.m., we're still able to provide them and sell them alcohol. It's not a case of we're going to be selling copious amounts of alcohol until 11 o'clock.
All right. So perhaps just to further clarify, the boundary of the premises license is precisely what? So let's not necessarily break it down into the alcohol and film elements. Is it the borders of the oldest field, the track to that field, and the car park area?
Yeah.
All of those areas?
Yeah.
Can you maybe take the committee through what you anticipate happening if a guest turns up and they have they purchase some Prosecco on check-in? They go down to the film area and glamping pods and have their dinner, and they drink their Prosecco, and they then wish to purchase more Prosecco.
Yes, so obviously if that was the case, as I said, with the majority of bookings, and our business plan is it would all be sort of pre-booked. So again, tonight, for example, if they're having a bottle of Prosecco, what we're doing at the moment is obviously because we don't have an alcohol license, we sometimes have a call at 8 o'clock saying, oh, they've had a bottle of Prosecco that they might have brought with them, or, can somebody go out and get us another one? In which case then we bring them back up, back to the point of sale, which it will be, and then back down. But we're trying to avoid that. We're not trying to create an environment where people can get, extremely inebriated. It's just a courtesy of, you can have a bottle of Prosecco on arrival in your tent, or, you can purchase a bottle of wine with your pizzas.
I see. Did you give any consideration to an off license rather than an on license with a rather large premises license? If the intention was to sell it at the horse box and take it away to consume, and that was always going to be the model?
No, I didn't. I absolutely didn't consider that. I didn't even think of it, honest.
Now, I appreciate that. It's in Appendix 22 is a schedule of proposed conditions. Now, I've heard Mr. Morgan speak, and he's indicated that not all of those proposed conditions have been agreed by you, which the committee are aware of. And one of the conditions that is being sought by the licensing authority is that you will undertake hourly intervals an inspection of the premises to ensure that the licensing objectives are being adhered to. I think it's the suggested condition 17 on page 122. It may be worthwhile taking the committee through how that obligation would work in relation to your business model of perhaps selling 1 or 2 bottles of Prosecco at 4 o'clock, but having to do hourly monitoring until the end of licensing hours at 11. It seems to be the cost would outweigh the profit from any alcohol sale, or have I got that wrong?
By no means are we looking to get, to make a significant profit from the alcohol. I think it's more just the convenience that, if we do supply alcohol, it's not going to, we'll be buying it from a local supermarket and selling it at not much of a profit. That's not the route that we're going down at all. It's just to add to the experience. As I said previously, what we're looking to do now and going forward would be to have 4 pods, more of a luxury experience, more like boutique-y, but the sale of alcohol isn't, or the sale of films, it's not something that's going to create a lot of income for us. In terms of checking on the, I've just got to Appendix 22. So in terms of checking on the licensable area, obviously we live on site. The licensable area is covered by CCTV, 24-hour CCTV. So checking that every 2 hours. Obviously after that time, we like to give our guests time to themselves. We don't want to be popping in every 5 minutes.
Sorry if I interject. It's just that I think the condition at 17 being proposed would cover the licensable area, which would be the entire premises, from my understanding.
Yeah.
And I think the CCT obligation limits itself to the licensable area where the supply of alcohol takes place, which would be the horsebox car park area.
Yeah.
So the obligation being proposed under the license is that there'll be hourly inspections of the entire premises, within reason, which would include the glamping site. What's your view of that obligation, and will you be able to meet that?
Yeah, we definitely would be able to meet it. Obviously, we've when we have guests here, as I said, we're on site until they leave. We are actually having CCTV put down there. Obviously, we've just had just in terms of, because we've unfortunately had quite a lot of threatening comments from the business starting up in terms of damage. So we're having CCTV to cover the Alders area, which is going to be solar powered. So that's something we're looking to get done between July and August this year.
Yeah.
Obviously then it would mean that we could remotely check it every hour, like I do here, rather than actually physically going down.
Yeah. One of the pillars of the licensing objectives that the committee need to consider is public safety, and then that can include entry and exit from the licensed premises. I understand the farm's relatively remote in terms of access. It's not, for instance, a public house on a high street, close to a taxi rank, etc.
Yeah.
What is the plan if someone does become intoxicated within the premises, if it is granted, and you need to remove them from the site? How do you ensure their safety in exiting the premises in that condition?
Well, this is exactly why we're applying for the alcohol license. Obviously, having had a bring your own alcohol policy for the last year, it's allowed people to get to the point where they are, extremely inebriated, and which point we have had to intervene in times. So that's the main reasons we are applying for the alcohol license. In terms of that, obviously you said about getting inebriated, it would be our responsibility then to ensure that somebody doesn't get to the point of inebriation where it was a challenge to get them off site. Within our terms and conditions, we do state that they are responsible for their own well-being. Like, we have adults here, you do take, as a business, yes, we do have a certain amount of responsibility for somebody's well-being, but it does pass over to them at some point as well as a reasonable, reasonable adult. I've had the emergency services here. Obviously, the fire service has been down. And they don't have any objections, and the police do either. But if it was a case that somebody was extremely inebriated, it would be a case of us driving down and driving them back up, calling, if it was worst case scenario, emergency services, which can get to the car park, and then go from there. But as I said, the whole point of the alcohol license is to completely avoid that, because we wouldn't be selling alcohol to somebody who was inebriated.
Yeah, it's just, I think the subcommittee need to give consideration to the premises as a whole, and best will in the world, some people may sign something to say, yes, we'll behave responsibly, but they may not. So just to further clarify on the evenings, if someone at 9 p.m. did fancy another bottle of Prosecco, what you're saying is that no, they wouldn't be able to obtain it from you?
I've got to be honest. Honestly, no. Like, our plan, even though we will have the license, the plan is for them to purchase the alcohol when they check in, and that's it. That's us done. Then, I'm sure you appreciate that. My father's semi-retired. I've got my little boy's 1 year old.
Yeah.
I'm having a baby in July. I don't want to be running up and down a field, between up until 11 o'clock. The idea of the timings of that is to cover us for the check-in. So whether somebody is checking in at 4 o'clock or 10 o'clock, they're able to purchase their a bottle of Prosecco or the bottle of wine, go down the field, and then that's us done in terms, apart from obviously the hourly check-ins, which could be done remotely via CCTV. It's not a case of us running up and down, see if they want another drink, see if they want a bottle of vodka. Absolutely not. That's not what we want to do at all. It's they check in, they buy their alcohol, they go down, and then they're left to their own devices, aside from us doing our check-ins.
Yeah, I guess on reflection, do you regret perhaps not putting something to that effect in the operating schedule proposed? Because the reason for that question is, if the premises is granted as license is granted as requested, then that's the model that you don't want. Is very capable of being created, where someone can simply walk to the horse box and be served alcohol. Obviously, you've got control over the business and how it's conducted. Of course, as I'm saying, you have to do that. But yeah, just back to the operating schedule. What's your view on there being a restriction to the sale of alcohol only at the point of check-in?
That's the business model that we want to do. As I said, it's not a profitable side of our business. The profitable side of our business is people coming and staying. That's just a nice add-on. In terms of the operating schedule, yes, 100%. This is the first alcohol or any license I've put in, myself. So it's there's certainly, with the feedback and the objections, there's a lot of things I would have changed on the initial application, given the chance. But I'm just sort of working through it now. But in terms of the operating schedule, yes, I understand that it could open that up to that, but that's absolutely not the route that we're going down. As I said, running up and down a field at 11 o'clock at night to make £1 profit on a bottle of Prosecco is just not a viable business plan. Yeah,
that makes sense. You've been very patient, but perhaps my only last question is just in relation to getting guests to and from Aldersfield from the car park. What's the proposal in that sense?
The same as we do now. So we've got we've got 2 4x4s. So this business plan has been the same since last year. So guests arrive and they park on the yard. And then they are taken down to the tents. The reason that we've done that is obviously we don't want guests driving up and down. We certainly don't want guests being able to access their vehicle when they're inebriated, whether it's bring your own or whether it's purchased off us. It's just more of a safety aspect from us. Again, all the cars then are covered by CCTV on the yard, so it's just a little bit safer, and we sort of know who's coming and going then,
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I have a few hands up. Mr. Garland, I think, next.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Todd has actually answered a lot of my questions, but one of the questions is really about again, Harry Smith and Amanda Smith both mentioned that Appendix 2 satellite map doesn't show, or does show, a wider area than actually Tog Farm's land. So just to clarify that this isn't a license for all of that area as premises, a license for all of that. It really is, just to clarify, it is for the Tog Farm particular areas. But also, is it really a cost effective to have a horse box if it's really providing alcohol at check-in? It doesn't suggest to me that this is going to be a horse box that is only going to be used once and then shut down. Is it going to be something where the guests will travel up and down to throughout the night? So that is my question to Bridget.
Well, in terms of guests travelling up and down, I think anybody that's been to the farm and the licensing authorities have walked up and down, it's not, you know, it's not around the corner, the horse box. In terms of it being cost effective, we've already got the horse box. It's just used for storage at the moment, so that's not one of our concerns. Obviously, in terms of having the horse box there, it will be a sort of check-in area with a guest as well as a point of sale. Obviously, we're not going to have draft beer or anything. It's just going to be a storage area for bottles of Prosecco and wine, etc. And as I said, with our guests, we have constant communication between them. So far, with the guests that we have had, if they have had to come back up to their cars because they've forgotten something where the horse box will be, they've contacted us and we've gone down to pick it up. If they do decide to wander up to the horse box, obviously we're not going to have that manned at all times. Just due to costings, staff costings, it's not going to be something that's going to be open all the time. The idea is, and guests will be aware that they arrive, they check in. If they want a bottle of Prosecco, they buy it from there, and then they go down the field. You know, as I said, we're not going to be running around trying to give somebody a bottle of Prosecco.
Ms. Garland, are you okay?
Yeah, also, I want to ask about the question of access for the fire service and emergency services. Only a couple of weeks ago, there was an incident here in the neighbouring stables who shares that very same track to Tog Farm. A horse went down on this occasion. The emergency services were called, an emergency veterinary was called. None of those vehicles could get down there to deal with that particular incident. What actually happened was all of those fire services, and there were a couple of tenders that attended that incident, blocked the road in the lanes of Rudbury for a couple of hours. Now, as it happened, it was a horse that could very well have been an individual, a person. Clearly, those emergency vehicles could not get down there. So that shows that the access and egress to this for emergency services is very difficult, and those services would not have been able to get there.
Yeah, I was there the night that the emergency services come out. So we've had similar incidences with horses, you know, and we have had the access down here, not with the emergency services, but with veterinary, with you know, emergency doctors, with ambulances coming up and down the track. But again, as I said, if it was anything was to come to that, it would be our responsibility to obviously following any emergency service guidelines to go down to the guests and to bring them back up to safety. We've previously had somebody had a choking fit down the field, and in which case we were called, we brought them up, and the emergency services were there and were able to continue as they would do normally.
But not on site, not where the incident happened. If there was a fire down there and the emergency services needed to get down there, that would not be possible.
Yeah, the emergency services, the fire service have obviously been out and they've seen the precautions that we've taken to ensure there's a little risk of fire as possible. And obviously we've got the relevant steps in place if there was the unlikely event of a fire. But no, they wouldn't be able to get right down to the bottom of the field.
That's your last question, Ms. Garland?
Yeah, when I know that the fire service and police have not submitted any objections on this occasion, but when Inspector Gavin Clifton came initially, he said that the site would be impossible for the police service to be able to get down there should an incident occur, and that they don't have 4x4s available to Gwent Police to be able to deal with the situation there. So I'm quite surprised. I know he's left and the resources have changed, but that's what he said at the time.
Okay, thank you. You can give that in your representation later on anyway.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Adams, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for Todd for, he admittedly took a long time and lots of questions, and so many of them would say, oh, that's another one of mine ticked off now. The answers come. So basically, casual purchase of alcohol on site for your guests once they've checked in is something you want to avoid at all costs for as long as possible. But I'm sure in emergency circumstances, like I didn't order enough beforehand and I was unable to collect that small amount there, can we get some more? And you also then expanded from Prosecco to other wines, and you also mentioned vodka, but you said draft beer, certainly not. So is it just Prosecco and other wines, and any spirits at all?
Oh
on
no,
site?
I was sorry, I was just using vodka as a
That was just
example.
to
Yeah,
yeah.
by no means do I want to apply anybody with a bottle of, you know, Grey Goose down the field.
Yeah.
No, all we want to supply, as I said, Prosecco,
As
you
a
know,
celebration.
if somebody's feeling lavish, or you know, obviously we love supporting local businesses. If it was a case of getting
Yeah.
in contact with the brewer, there's a few breweries around that do like the little ciders, the craft ales. It'd be, you know, small things like that. Again, we get a lot of people booking for celebrations. If it was somebody's birthday and they didn't like Prosecco, they wanted ales, they could have a few craft ales. But no, there absolutely won't be any. You know, the horse box is not fancy by any means. It is literally just four walls.
I accept that. How about soft drinks for kids?
Yeah, so we provide them normally when people are
But
coming
we
with
would
kids.
want them all ordered up front.
Yeah, well, when we bring when people have their children with them, obviously they've got, I know it's not nice for kids, but they've got fresh tap water down there, and then obviously within meals, because most people that come book a meal, it would be, you know, a pizza with a bottle of Coke. Again, I'm not going to be running up and down the field to sell somebody a can of Coke. But yeah, normally when we have kids down there, you know, we put like a little hamper with a few sweets and a few like fruit shoots and whatnot in there. But I found most people that come with children, you know, they come prepared. They come with a suitcase full of stuff.
Okay, on the entrance and exit, which Ms. Darlin just asked about, when you have had many people attend over the last year regarding any of your mini festivals, what kind of numbers and what kind of traffic have you had coming in and then leaving safely? Because I know that that's been looked at. I don't know whether we have anyone from the council who can report to us on their findings of this, Lee, but that's something, of course, that is that we have looked at.
Yeah, it was an absolute nightmare. You know, if I'm to be frank, it was, you know, I think the idea when we took the farm back over to run the business was, oh yeah, it's brilliant. We can just have loads of people here. Obviously, the reality of that was something completely different. It's absolute nightmare. So yes, we have had the largest amount of people we've had have been 50 for a wedding, and I vowed I would never ever do it again. So again, as I touched earlier on the 500 festival, you couldn't pay me enough money to have a festival of 500 here. It's just
you have that experience of
yeah,
large like coming in and out.
Yeah, and you know, as I said, as a new business, yes, we have made mistakes. Yes, we've been, you know, I'm fully aware that we've you know, we thought, oh, it's brilliant, we'll have a DJ, nobody will hear it, we're in the middle of a field. Obviously that wasn't the case. And we, you know, we hope not to be penalised for the mistakes that we've made in the first year going forward, and that's exactly what we're trying to rectify now by having, you know, a sustainable business in the country. But that's why at the moment it's a maximum, even if it's a maximum of 10 guests, we encourage all of our guests to car share. Just for the traffic up and down, it's just, you know, it's not something that we want to be able to do. Prior to this, we were saying to guests that, you know, you could come for the day and then leave. We're not doing that anymore, just because obviously it creates more traffic coming back and forth. So it's the minimum amount of cars possible, the minimum amount of people exiting and entering the farm. That's the business plan. That's what we want to go for. The least amount of stress possible for everybody.
Yeah, that'll be okay when the guests are known to each other. Much better than when you start having 3 or 4 different and dispersed.
I think with a family, you know, a family of 4, you'd arrive in 1 car. So the maximum, you know, we'd be looking at really for when we've got 4 pods, a maximum of 4 cars.
Plus your own, of course, your own transport.
Yeah, our trucks are parked on a different place. Obviously, the priority for the guest cars is that they're covered by the CCTV, so they're parked in a certain area.
Okay, thanks, Miss Lewis.
It's okay.
Thank you. Councillor Cushing, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think, as Mr. Lawson alluded to, I think from what your business plan seems to be, you might have been better off applying for an off license rather than an on-site license. From what you're telling us regarding, you know, people picking up a bottle of Prosecco or a bottle of wine and taking it down to their tent. But one of the questions I'd like to ask is that what's the parking capability? How many cars are able to park at the check-in area at any one time?
We have had, obviously when we've had the large events, we've had 30 cars parked there. Obviously that's what we're trying to get away from, and the farm has changed obviously since then. So at the moment, I'd say the maximum capacity for cars is 10 cars.
Okay, thanks. And I think as Ms. Garland alluded to regarding the emergency services, I think really that should have been down to the emergency services providing a report to bring forth at this meeting, you know, regarding the inabilities to get to a particular area. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there no other questions? Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Lewis.
Thank you.
We'll go now to Mr. Dean Pugh, please, for his representation. You're on mute.
Hello. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, my objection is obviously as it stands at the moment with the access to the bottom of the field area, bottom of the track, and access to the field. It was so rutted at the time. I can understand Miss Lewis saying yes, they can transport the guests down to the premises and back. You've got to look at then the further situation for example, early hours of the morning. If one of the guests has an issue, they want to get from there, they can't contact the farm, they're inevitably going to end up walking towards the farmhouse and up that track. With the state of that field, the bottom area at that time, it just wasn't safe at all. And that was our concern mainly.
Yeah, well, I think I've sent you, obviously since your visit, as soon as you give us that feedback, that we've started to amend the route straight away. Obviously, during the winter, and obviously we had the bad weather, the ruts, were at 100%, they were terrible. So I think I've sent you updated photos of the work that we've commenced so far, to level those off, which is an ongoing project which we're doing. As I said, it is costly, and it's not an overnight fix. However, they are now, much better, much smoother. In terms of guests not being able to contact us, every guest and every tent is provided with a power pack with phone chargers, a set of emergency numbers for myself and for other people on the farm. So we are always contactable.
And the issue, I talked to your father on going down last week, and obviously the concern was why that area became rutted, and that there was a water problem. Obviously, the one end of the duct that goes under the pathway.
Yeah, with the cows. Yeah.
Yeah, that was blocked.
Sorry, Chair, if I can just intervene at this point. I know that I'm conscious in terms of protocol, really, this is an opportunity for Mr. Pugh on behalf of Environmental Health to give his representations in relation to his comments about licensing objectives. I think it's not, I suppose, a discussion between the two parties that needs to be had now. I think Mr. Pugh needs to provide his comments, detail his objection if he still objects, and then confirms whether that is his position. I think later, obviously, then Mr. Lewis will have the chance to respond, but I think Mr. Pugh needs to provide his representation so that members are aware what his concerns are, and then obviously invite questions from members and Mr. Lewis if that helps. Otherwise we'll have this back and forth scenario, which may not be helpful. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
Okay, yeah. The reason for my objections then were obviously the access, which is on page 41, Appendix 6. Page 41. But obviously, regarding there is a rough track which was deeply rutted around the bottom end as it approaches the field. There was extensive water pooling at the time of our visit. And as I say, the access to the area, in my opinion, at that time wasn't safe. It was noted, as I say, in the schedule that didn't outline how guests were to be transported between the licensable areas, i.e. the horse box and the damping pods themselves. It was a fairly extensive walk, 15 minutes over the rough terrain. And as I say, my objections remain in place until the works have been undertaken to provide a surface to the track that is free from holes and ruts, and the surface of the track must be maintained thereafter in a suitable condition, which I think is going to be difficult, obviously, while there is that water problem, or there has been a water problem. The works have been undertaken to the entrance of the camping area to prevent water pooling, and arrangements to be made to implement to transport guests safely between the licensable areas. Guests must be transported in a suitable enclosed vehicle, and they mustn't be transported in any ATV vehicles, that is an all-terrain vehicle, as there are issues with those. I'm not sure if the farm uses those, but they are sort of known to be used on farm premises. Obviously, I put a number of conditions which I would like to see added. The condition of the surface of the track between the licensable areas is proactively monitored and maintained in a suitable condition thereafter. Guests must be transported safely between the licensable areas in suitably enclosed vehicles. The guests must not be transported in a trailer behind an all-terrain vehicle, ATV, and guests should not sit aside in an all-terrain ATV. The track between the licensable areas and the camping area should be kept free from farm livestock at all times. Arrangements should be made for guests to be transported in a suitable vehicle from the camping area in the event of an emergency overnight. And the premises license holder shall ensure that a sufficient number of suitable receptacles are located in appropriate locations for the depositing of waste materials such as food wrapping, drinks containers, and smoking related litter, etc. Alcohol must be consumed in the second licensable area from polycarbonate glasses. This should remain free from glass. Once alcohol is decanted, guests must be encouraged to dispose of the bottles. In the waste receptacles provided, and suitable hand washing facilities and signage must be provided adjacent to the first licensable area, that is the horse box, as guests may be tempted to pet animals which could be in the adjacent paddock area. as you say, there is obviously there is risks, health risks with animal contact, etc. So that's the reasoning for the suitable hand washing facilities. And as you see from my objection, you can see the pictures of the rutting, which was there at the time of the visit, and also the water pooling at the entrance to the field. Does anybody have any questions? Or
Thank you, Mr. Pugh. Are there any questions? Your hands up, please. Councillor Cushing.
Yeah, Chair, thanks. Sorry, I'm having a few technical difficulties. Yeah, just a quick question then to Mr. Pugh. What's the distance between the licensing area where the horse box is and where the glamping pods are? What's the distance? And also, what's the distance then to the farmhouse where they might need to walk in the event of an emergency and they can't get telephone contact?
distance wise, I can't tell you off the top of my head, sorry, but it was about a 15-minute walk, and the farmhouse from the licensing box is probably literally 20-25 yards. It's not, it's basically more or less in the same area.
Okay, lovely, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. There's no other hands. Joanne. Thank you, Mr. Pugh.
Thank you.
Actually, Chair, I thought I just, I'll put my hand up now. I thought I'd already done it. It takes a little while.
Okay, councillor.
Yeah, just to ask about that distances. You said about a 15-minute walk, Dean.
Yeah.
It's Councillor Mike Adams. What were the conditions that you were walking in to be able to do it in 15 minutes then? And this was in the good light of day?
Good light of day. It was dry conditions. The water pooling was actually at the bottom of the track entrance to the field. But as I say, my concerns for the safety perspective lies more so for evening, nighttime area when, as I say, it's pitch black. You wouldn't see those ruts. It's, as I say, with the rutting you can be seen on the photographs. You can understand it's difficult walking along that type of terrain in daylight. So in darkness, the risk then becomes elevated.
Suspect.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thanks for that. Sorry, Chair.
Thank you, councillor. No other answer. Thank you, Mr. Pugh.
Thank you.
Ms. Annette Dix, please, to make a representation.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I'm Annette Dix, I'm the Assistant Licensing Manager, and I act as the responsible authority for the Licensing Authority. I refer you to my representations in Appendix 7 of the report, which support the concerns of health and safety following our visit with other RAs. Obviously, as one of the members has asked the question, on the day that we went, conditions were good. It was dry and it was obviously light, but the ground conditions were very poor, with rutting, extreme rutting from the 4x4, I'm assuming that Bridget is using to transport guests. At the end of the lane between with the access to the film area, there was a large amount of pooling, and obviously this appears to be a recurring problem, which Bridget's dad has referred to, and unless this is resolved, I would say that it's not meeting the licensing objectives of public safety. Obviously, that's our primary concern. As Mr. Pugh has mentioned, there are two parts to this licence in the distance between. I couldn't say, but it said it was a 15-minute walk, and that was in daylight. Whilst, as I said, Miss Lewis was very accommodating in answering questions that we raised at the visit. Some of the things that she has mentioned were not put in her operating schedule, and hence the reason why, if the licence was to be granted, I have made suggestions in relation to the control of the area. The conditions that I have recommended, if the committee were of a mind to grant the licence, are in relation to the use of CCTV, which I originally said would be at the point of sale. And then obviously further conditions relating to the use of that CCTV to ensure that it's regularly maintained and monitored. An incident refusals book should be in place. And obviously, due to the distance between the licensing areas, I've advocated that hourly checks be taken of the area. When we went to the premises on our initial visit, as I said, there's a horse box due to be located for the sale supply of alcohol, and there were two small sheds which Bridget had referred to as where staff would stay in inclement weather. You know, they would stay there waiting for guests to come in. There was a concern that, and I know that Mr. Rawson has brought this question into play in relation to what if people wanted more drink. So that's another reason why I would expect regular monitoring, so that people didn't attempt to walk back up the site, particularly obviously in darkness because of public safety issues. There's no lighting. But there was some concern as to how much alcohol would be taken down, obviously to consume, and that was another reason, as I said, for my suggestion for regular monitoring. But as I said, I couldn't support the application as it stands at the moment because of the ground conditions, as Mr. Pugh has stated. In relation to the question concerning the number of guests, I would advocate that the number of guests would be 10 at any one time, as mentioned by Mr. Morgan, and that would include children, because the licensable activities are not just alcohol. The licensable activities applied for refer to films as well. So the 10 guests would be 10 guests, unless of course there wasn't any licensable activities, and then that would be for Miss Lewis to decide how many she would permit. Obviously, we cannot control bring your own, as it was mentioned, and consumption is not a licensable activity. But I noted that Bridget has said that she intends to install CCTV down in the pod area, which is where the films are, and obviously that would be welcomed if the licence was granted, because she would be obviously able to comply with the conditions of licence. She does refer to, as I said, in her operating schedule with no more than 10 guests, but some concern has been raised in relation to the response to other persons' representations, where she refers to 15. Clearly, if a licence was granted today, then a condition would be on a licence that it would be no more than 10. So there's concern there already in relation to that she's referring to 15 guests. Also, in discussions with Mr. Lewis's mother, with Mrs. Hayworth, there was also reference to a party of 14. So I can only reiterate that Miss Lewis has put in her operating schedule that there would be no more than 10 guests. They would be pre-booked. As I said, if the licence was granted today, then that would become a conditional licence, and if any breaches of the conditions of licence were made, then that is an offence. Nothing further to add, Chair, so if there's any questions, I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dix. Are there any questions, please? Mr. Pugh, please.
Yeah, Chair, it's not so much a question. I've just checked the Google Maps, and it's roughly around 600 metres from the actual walking distance from the horse box down to the entrance to the field.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pugh.
Miss Garland, please. You have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Annette. It's really a question about, we're talking about premises and licenses, etc. If it were to be granted, how how can you say that it's restricted to just Prosecco or just beer or just, and how much? Is that restricted in any way? Because that seems to be what's being talked about. But I think if a license has been granted, it's granted for alcohol without any particular restrictions on it. Put me right, please.
You're quite correct, Mrs. Garland. If a licence was granted for the sale or supply of alcohol, it's any alcohol, unless a condition is put on the licence as to what types of alcohol can be sold, but that's very unusual in those circumstances.
Thank you, Annette.
Thank you. Councillor Adams, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Annette. Just following your presentation then and reading through the report as well, you hardly took a step sideways, so well done on that. But yeah, that's the question I think I was alluding to when I asked one earlier about, is it isn't just Prosecco, is it it's other wines now, and then it went into possibly vodka was mentioned, so spirits, although that might not be the intention, as you quite adequately answered, Mrs. Garland. When it's alcohol, unless we put a limit on the strength of the spirit, I suppose. And as you said, that's very unusual to do on any premises with an alcohol license. So thanks for just confirming that as well. Thanks.
If I could just reiterate, Councillor Adams, obviously we cannot control bring your own. So
No.
Based upon if Ms Lewis wishes to supply alcohol, then there is the possibility that people will be bringing their own as well.
That's right.
As I said, and I can only look at conditions to control those activities to ensure it's an offence to sell alcohol to somebody who's intoxicated anyway.
Yeah.
That's a statutory condition, but yeah, that's reason for my conditions if the license was to be granted. But as I said, my primary concern is the safety objective at the moment with the ground conditions,
Yes.
which I support health and safety on.
Okay. Thanks, Annette.
Thank you. Ms.
you, Chair.
Garland. Thank you. Ms. Garland, you've got your hand up. You have another question or not?
Sorry, Chair, that's a legacy hand. Sorry, I'll take it down.
Thank you. Councillor Cushin. Question, please.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just one quick question really, aimed at Miss Lewis. I'd like to know, what's the lighting situation around the glamping?
Sorry, Miss Lewis, you're asking the question of now?
Well, Miss Lewis, and it reverts to the health and safety issue that Ms Dix has been mentioning. What's the lighting situation around the glamping pods? I can't really see from the photographs what the sort of lighting condition would be during darkness.
So we've got, as I said, every tent has a power pack, which is fully charged and lasts for 48 hours. Within that power pack is we have plugged in outdoor lights, which I could give you the exact wattage if I have a look at it, but and that's around the whole premise, whole area of the pod. So although the Alders is one large area, that we've obviously only got 2 pods at the moment, but within the pods is the tent, somewhere for them to have food, a hot tub and a path connecting all of those, and the lighting covers all of that. So obviously, as Dean mentioned, while the ruts are particularly bad, there is a path and well-lit area for them to stay on. If and when we have the CCTV put down there, the CCTV has its own lighting, which is like it's not as strong as a halogen light, but it covers it covers a large area, and again that would be on the entrance of the entrance to the Alders, and that would be a 24-hour lighting, and then they have the lighting around the hot tub, and we also have solar lighting, so if for any reason they were to fail, we have solar lighting around the tents, the toilet blocks, the shower blocks, and then since the visit we had with the licensing authorities, we've actually put lighting directing guests from the pods to the toilets in case of if they were to go back and forth during the night. There's also fully charged and battery operated torches in the case of emergency, which we've been recommended to have by the fire service. So within the tent and within the welcome pack, there's a suitcase full of torches, which are battery operated and fully charged as well.
Okay, thanks very much. I know about if you have in the daylight cameras, I've got daylight cameras around my property, and they do actually have their own sort of light into them. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Mr. Dix, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to reiterate what Bridget had said. At the time of our inspection, the path between the one area, the horse box, and the camping area isn't lit at all. As I said, she's referring to the use of CCTV being installed. But would the path between the two areas, Bridget, would that have lighting then?
The plan is for that area there to have the solar lighting, which obviously it's not as effective as the plug-in lighting, but it would have solar lighting, and then the cameras would be at 3 different points. So obviously at the point where the horse box is the end, so the start of the track, that's mains powered, and the CCTV. Then we'd have one at the middle of the track, and then at the end of the track where we walk through a few fields, so all of those would be covered. This is something that we haven't done regardless whether the license is granted, just in terms of a public safety point of view, from any damage to be done to the field, any trespassers and whatnot.
But there's nothing in place at the moment, is it? It's just on the camping area where we've got solar lighting and some lighting, as you said, where the hot tub and the glamping pods are. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I just wanted to refer to films as well. There was some reference to whether the films would be inside the pods or outside. In relation to the application, Bridget has referred to the films being both, which would be inside and outside a designated area. So just wanted to clarify that.
When it would be outside, I just want to clarify, it would literally just be outside the tent, so directly outside the tent. It wouldn't be outside in like a communal area or in a separate tent. It would be so they could have the tent doors open and the projector would be outside, or obviously in bad weather it would be inside.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Dick. And no other questions? Thank you. I'll go to Christian Jennings, please, for his representation.
Hi, Chair. Yeah, Christian Jennings from Environmental Health Pollution. We had some initial concerns upon submission of the application, also around the public nuisance aspect of not only licensable activities, but also access and egress from the site. We know that there's shared access with other residents, so we did have some concerns. We attended the responsible authorities site visit, and a lot of those concerns were allayed by having conversations with other RAs, but also Ms. Lewis as well. So the majority of our concerns were allayed by the fact that there would be a maximum of 10 attendees at any one time. Sorry, I'm referring to Appendix 8, if anybody needs to have a look. The provision of film is to be delivered to individual camping pods with audio provided by projectors, not in a central location. And the provision of film is available part of a wider accommodation provision. So access and egress is unlikely to occur sort of later in the night. So people wouldn't just attend, watch a film and go home. It would be part of sort of like an overnight stay. So we were satisfied that would be okay. So we didn't have any objections to the application, but in order to reduce the potential impact on nearby residents, we did propose a few conditions that we would have liked the applicant to agree to, but if the licensing authority are minded to approve the application, we would like the conditions to be agreed or considered. So one is in relation to waste, to ensure that waste collection doesn't happen during unsociable hours. The second is sort of like a catchment for the premises license holder to ensure that patrons are using outside areas in a quiet and orderly fashion. And the other one would be in periods where they are using regulated entertainment. So in this instance, it would be films. They carry out some regular boundary monitoring or monitoring in areas where they think they can give a good representation of what residential exposure is likely to be. So that would satisfy us, and we would be happy with those. I do have a couple of other comments to make. One would be over the location plan that's been submitted with the application. Let me just have a quick look. I think it was like page 15 or something, but it's been referred to earlier. And Mr. and Mrs. Smith alluded to the fact that their property is within the red line boundary, which was obviously, but that was something that was included by licensing, not the applicant. The applicant's location plan, I think, is actually quite poor. Looking at the amount of land that they have, I think we need, as part of this application, a location map that outlines where, like a GIS map, something that is on, even if it's taken off of Google Maps, where we know the exact boundary of the licensable areas. Because from the initial application, I assumed that film would be in one communal location. That wasn't the case. So obviously it needs to be updated to show what licensable areas are which. And obviously, like Mr. and Mr. Smith alluded to, it needs to include areas that are solely theirs and which would be licensable. So it would be really handy if that could be part of the application as well. And also, I say like a GIS map, like a Google map, because the one that's been provided is obviously just shows, and it doesn't really give you a good representation of the size of the land and where exactly the licensable activities will be taking place. So I think that would be a good part. The second was just one to Bridget, really. I haven't actually seen sight of the information regarding projectors and speakers. I'm happy for you to send that on and I can have a look and advise, but it's not really something that I would need to see before the application anyway, because I'm fairly satisfied that individual projectors aren't going to generate enough anyway. And even if there was an element of noise nuisance, we could deal with that through our normal working practices, which would be the Environment Protection Act. So that's it for me. If there's any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Mr. Jennings. Are there any questions, please? No? No questions? Thank you, Mr. Jennings. I'll go now to Mr. Tim Kehoe from Trading Standards, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Tim Kehoe, I'm Senior Trading Standards Officer, and I was responsible authority for trading standards. My area of concern generally is the protection of children from harm, and the trading standards involvement is in relation to underage sales and the protection of children that way. There's a lot of overlap between our responsibilities and concerns and that of other responsible authorities, and specifically child protection. My representations in relation to the application were merely in support of representations already made by the other responsible authority, by Deb Lewis, the Child Protection Coordinator. And there were 6 proposed additions to the operating schedule proposed by Child Protection, which in my position as responsible authority, I wholeheartedly support it. I also understand that the applicants have agreed these proposals, and should the license be approved, that these conditions will be added to the license. If I can help any other way, Chair, I will do.
Thank you. Are there any questions, please? Councillor Cushin?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'd like to ask Mr. Keohane, has there been any checks on DBSs or safeguarding training for any employees?
That's not our area, Chair. So the premises aren't licensed at the moment, so it's not something that training standards would do. I don't know whether any of the other responsible authorities can help.
I think the lady who deals with child protection isn't actually in attendance, but perhaps Mr. Morgan can advise.
Thank you,
Mr. Morgan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There would not be any requirement thus far for anybody to have, and it's not a condition that's been advocated by any of the responsible authorities. Perhaps it's a question, Councillor Cushin, you could ask of Ms. Lewis later in relation to her staff and any training or any safeguards she takes as an existing employer, but it wouldn't ordinarily. There's nothing within the conditions that's been proposed or any representations at the moment that requires a DBS check of the employees. But certainly, please pose that question, I would say, to Ms. Lewis, the applicant.
You're on mute, Councillor.
Yes, I did put on mute. Do apologise. Thanks, Chair. Mr. Lewis, I'm wondering if you could advise whether or not there's been any safeguarding training or DBS checks on employees, please.
Hi, yeah, so I have a extensive DBS check. So does one of the other employees that works for us. She's had a DBS check as well. In terms of safeguarding and in terms of training, I myself have had relevant health and safety, children's safety training. So has she, and then the way that we work it is that obviously either myself or her are available at any one time. So if there is anybody else working on site at that time, either myself or her are there. But yeah, we have all had, both of us have had DBS checks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Adams, please.
I was just wondering, Chair, on that particular question, is it the case because any children attending the site would be in the company of their own parents, there may be less automatic need for that kind of activity? But if they were attending as children only on the site, then yes, we would be expecting to be moved towards everyone who will be coming into contact with them to have DBS and other items that we need to look at all of that. I just wondered if the automatic nature might be softened because parents would always be expected to always be with them. That was just something to take into account. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. And then no other questions? No, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Keon. Looking now, I think Christine Forhead and Elaine Forhead have left the meeting.
Yes, Chair, that's correct. Councillor Elaine Boyd had a prior appointment at 11:30, so she's given apologies and left and asked if you can take her and Councillor Christine Forehead's representations into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We go down now to Mr. Jenkins, please, to make his representation. You're on mute, Mr. Jenkins. Still there.
No.
It's still on. Here we are. We're clear now.
Okay, thank you. Right, yeah, my name is Richard Jenkins. I live in Rydrig in Gwaenabara, which is approximately 250 metres or so from Tog Farm. I'm sure you're aware last year was horrendous. We had major noise problems with activities being held at Tog Farm. It posed a huge problem for my wife. She's a nurse, works in Landock Hospital on spinal rehabilitation, which is a really hard physical job. On lack of sleep because of the noise pollution coming from Tog Farm become unbearable and dangerous. Yeah. It's not sustainable. Alcohol was a major impact. Now, whether it is licensable activity or a non-licensable activity, the two are rather blurred as far as I'm concerned. I appreciate what Miss Lewis was saying about trying to alter her business and accommodate 10 people and reduce the alcohol consumption, which is in total contradiction to everything that's happened so far this season. There was a gathering of 18 people the first weekend of April at Tog Farm, where alcohol was consumed, and I can hear it. So it's a repeat of what was going on last year. By her own admission, she said she's not going to search people upon admission, upon check-in. So if she is selling these people, or including in part of her package a bottle of Prosecco, then one bottle of Prosecco isn't going to do any harm. But it's in relation to what other alcohol these people will be consuming on site. And that's where it gets a bit blurred, because they can say, okay, I've sold them a bottle of Prosecco. They've brought their own. Now they can carry on drinking. To me, living here, it doesn't matter whether it's been sold or whether they brought their own. The problem remains the same, and that's noise. In regards to other issues, health and safety, you talked upon. There was an incident last year on the 21st of April involving a dangerous dog from Tog Farm. It attacked my dog, and my dog required quite a lot of veterinary care afterwards. And it upsets me to think about it now. The gentleman in control, or so-called control of this dog, was verbally abusive towards my son. A minor. He received a conditional police caution, and my damages, my costs had to be repaid. To my knowledge, that dog is still there at Tog Farm. I've received no apologies, no communication from Tog Farm. I know it's got digressing a bit, but it comes under health and safety and child safety. I walked down to the site, the fields adjoining Tog Farm on a weekend to walk my dog, mostly on a Sunday morning or a Saturday morning, quite early, because we got horses and I'm up and about. And frequently, I walked down there and smelled cannabis. Alcohol and drugs go side by side, in my opinion. Now, by her own admission, she's not going down there because she did state she's got a young child and another one due in July. You're saying part of the conditions would be to do hourly checks. Yeah, no hourly checks will be done. The path is unlit. And even if there were hourly checks done, the noise pollution, again, by 4x4s hammering their way down that rutted, uneven road, causes more disruption, more noise, more light pollution in a very, very rural area. This area of Caerphilly Basin is unique. The wildlife, the fauna, no surveys have been conducted to the damage undertaken by this activity. Secondly, going back to your licensable boundaries, I suggest Caerphilly Council re-look at the boundaries. Part of the access to one of the glamping fields clearly crosses the disused railway line. which is not owned by Tog Farm. So this whole application should be looked at from scratch. It has affected my life over the last 18 months. It has affected my wife's life. I don't see why I should have to put up with the noise pollution, the light pollution, for them to profitize by this unlawful, and I say unlawful, and I stick by what I said in my statement, which was challenged, I know, by Miss Lewis, unlawful, as in it has no planning, granted. Everything's been done retrospectively. Alcohol was sold last year without license. It's demonstrated on their social media pages. And at one point, so distasteful, somebody was advertising alcoholic shots in syringes with a sign saying no shot, no admission, referring to COVID. Totally bad taste, I think. I propose that this application be dismissed and a whole review of this business be undertaken. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. Are there any questions, please, for Mr. Jenkins? Councillor Cushing.
Hello, Mr. Jenkins. I'm sorry to hear about your dog. I'm a pet owner myself, and it can be very, very upsetting. So, you know, I'm really sorry to hear about your dog there. One thing I'd like to ask Mr. Jenkins, was there, when you say about the noise pollution, because even unlicensed events, which I know was alluded to that been going on there, do they go on past 11 o'clock in the night?
Yes.
And have you contacted the police?
Yes, and kept a record as well for the council.
And do the police attend?
They did attend, and I believe a noise abatement order was imposed upon them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more questions? Councillor McAdams, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Mr. Jenkins, for that. Very emotive, and I can understand why you were affected by recalling the incidents last year. It really to underline the questions that Donna Cushion has just asked you about attendance reporting and all of that, and records available to the council for us to be able to corroborate. So yes, it is unfortunate, and having to put up with things that you didn't. How long have you lived there?
18 years.
18 years. And most of that time has been very enjoyable.
We're surrounded by horses. It's a very equine area.
Right. Yeah.
Over the last 15 years, there has been development next door to me with the Guinabara estate, which was once owned by Philibara Council. And it's very tastefully done. And they're like-minded people. We're all equine people. We've all got horses.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very quiet rural area.
So during that time, you've got used to change from as it originally used to be. But it's changed that, of course, that you've accepted because it's something that you're aware of and enjoy doing anyway. So I can understand that. And this is a very different change being proposed to become formally integrated. So yeah, and that's very often the case with people when they are faced with changes to what they've enjoyed for many years. And as part of the planning committee, I'm up against those kind of comments anyway, for very many reasons. So but thanks for giving us your experience of the last 18 months in particular.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Mr. Jenkins, I think it's Ms. Lewis's position that the committee is not being asked to compare apples and pears, and I think what she's saying is last year's events aren't going to be repeated because what the business model and the license being sought is catering to an entirely different event. What do you say in that regard? What I sense in the background to your evidence is that you've got no confidence in the Tog Farm Limited being able to do that.
What Miss Lewis has alluded to in terms of change suggests to me that her entire business model is based upon trust. Trust that people aren't going to drink too much. Trust that people are going to keep the volume down. As far as I'm concerned, the die is cast. Okay. Why would she be saying that her intention is to change her business model when she's already shown demonstration earlier this month that clearly that is not the case? Okay, we had 18 people attending a hen party 4 weeks ago, which it could clearly be heard. I mean, that's hardly a way to demonstrate change. So it's all based on trust. She's not going to go down there, or her colleagues aren't going to go down there in the middle of the night, because they never have, apart from when there's been 2 police incidents when they had to. Now, I don't know the outcome of those instances, but I know there were 2. No CCTV. And the councillor was quite correct in stating there is no adequate lighting to transport people back and forth from the main entrance to where the property is located down to the glamping fields. If there is a case of somebody wants to leave, what do? Walk? It's totally inadequate.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins.
Thank you. I have another hand up, Mr.
Yeah,
James,
yes. I just wanted to clarify. Environmental Health served an abatement notice for live music last September. I think it's important to note that live music is exempt whether a license is granted or not. So I mean that they would still be able to carry out live music. I do understand Mrs. Jenkins' point, but I just want to state that the live music complaints were obviously investigated last year, and a notice was served in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jennings. No more questions.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up a lot there.
No more questions. Mr. Jennings, can you take your hand down, please? Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Jenkins.
You're welcome.
We go now to Mrs. Garland for representation, please.
Thank you. Okay. My first concern really is that, I mean, although you're suggesting we're not measuring apples with pears, I think we have to also reflect on the historical evidence of how they have behaved as business proprietors and their disingenuous responses to some of the comments that are made. So my first concerns really are around the applicant's stated address and where the applicant actually lives. Incidentally, the old granary or tog has not been used as a farm for over 30 years. Instead, it's just kept as renting fields for pasture. Also stated that the applicant Bridget Lewis lives in the old granary with her father, Chris Lewis, mother and brothers. However, she actually lives in an unlawfully sited static caravan within the fields of Tog Farm, avoiding contributing to potentially the greater fee for this particular application.
Sorry, Ms. Garland, to interrupt halfway through. The applicant is the corporation Tog Farm Limited.
Okay.
Just bear that in mind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so but nevertheless, she still lives in an unlawfully sited static caravan whilst expecting to take for granted luxuries of services that us residents dutifully pay for, which she doesn't contribute council tax for an unlawfully sited caravan. Anyway, Miss Lewis also refers to contacting me at the beginning of their business venture. I first received an email message from the applicant, not at the beginning of their business venture, but late last year, after CCBC's investigations commenced around the business activities. Her request was that I help her in my capacity as a business advisor after NRW rep mentioned in conversation that I've been a qualified business advisor. Firstly, I've been retired for over 12 years. My business advice days were in my early career, and I would not have been able to provide any of that information. It would have been out of date. But secondly, after witnessing in the lanes of Rudry, Miss Lewis's mother stopping traffic to verbally abuse one of their neighbours for complaining about the noisy events, that's why I, when offered to redact my name, I didn't know we could actually until I was contacted by CCBC. I said, okay, that's fine, but I want to speak. So obviously I'm going to be made, my knowledge of me being able to represent this will be public then. But, to avoid the instance of perhaps me too being verbally abused in the streets and in the lanes. And of course, seeing how the applicant treated the NRW rep, providing his advice where he was ridiculed on Tog Farm social media after the event, after his visits. I certainly didn't feel that I could, having a conflict of interest, could give her any kind of advice. So I passed that information on to the other community councillors. I'm no longer a community councillor. I stepped back from that in February. But this brings me to an important point about the care and safety of the public and how the proprietors look at this. Because unknown to that NRW rep, the Lewis family, when he visited, had all tested positive for COVID-19 at that time. This was evidenced by they put it on social media, and an event for Tog Farm had been cancelled. However, when the NRW rep arrived, they failed to tell him this important information, and furthermore encouraged him to get into their car to go and visit the site. So this was with both the TOG directors, one of whom I know had been tested positive. This not only put the NRW rep at risk without his knowledge, but also his family and his associates. And as soon as the NRW rep learned of this fact, he notified his colleagues and immediately self-isolated. This shows a complete disregard for others' care and safety by the co-directors of TOG Farm. So this has a reflection on how they think about the public safety. Also in their application, they were asked how they would tackle safety of customers to their premises, and Miss Lewis's response was to get them customers to sign a disclaimer. Agriculture has one of the highest fatal accident rates of the of any industry in the UK. It also is the only industry that has to deal with the constant presence of children, because farms are homes as well as workplaces, and many visitors to the countryside have children amongst them. Children have indeed been put at risk, not just through the unsupervised access to the recently introduced animals to Tog Farm, but also through the movement of vehicles, and there are ATVs being used on Tog Farm. Tog Farm were transporting families from one location to another on the back of an open L200 pickup truck. And I'm advised that this truck was also driven at one time by an underage, unlicensed and uninsured person. But although at the time they may have found the sound of children screaming with joy at this perilous journey over this rough terrain entertaining, these activities could have been had a very different outcome, with a very different type of screaming from those children. The applicant also suggests that their efforts between 2020 and 2021 undertaken were as part of a permitted development and during a trial business period. I would suggest that the term has recently been introduced to them after the post investigations of CCBC looking into the business. Permitted development does not allow for the provision of alcohol without a license, nor does it provide for the supply of commercially provided food without the appropriate requirements and measures in place. And all this at a time when both you and I were socially distancing, complying with the law, whilst these groups were gathering, breaching COVID restrictions in many sorts of ways. Much of the evidence has been provided by provided to the licensing department of this provision of alcohol from the applicant's business activities from 2020 to date. Ms. Lewis admitted today that although she's working on a business model now that is different to the past, She's also suggesting tonight there are going to be 14 people attending an event. So I think she's disingenuous when she's suggesting that she's going to move to a new model. We also have evidence from many of these people who have attended these events. Their own marketing activities have promoted Prosecco being part of the paid for package, as well as retrieving many reviews, which I think you've all seen some of those that we've entered into the evidence, where their customers have complained they were catfished. I've only just learned what that word means, where they have paid for alcohol for a number of people only to be supplied with only a few bottles between them. So it shows alcohol has been provided for in a paid package. I know that Environmental Health visited this site to review its works have been carried out to specification. I also note they've upheld their objection as the work is not complete. I believe the work undertaken by the co-director of the company, Chris Lewis, is being undertaken by him because of his background in construction. But I suggest that the amount of work stipulated is unlikely to be completed, especially when the applicant suggests that she feels it's sufficient so far. Access and egress to the site is very difficult, and as acknowledged by Dean, only within the last 2 weeks, so this would have been post any contribution from the fire service and emergency services. So only within the last 2 weeks was there that incident where the horse required emergency services and emergency services could not get there. So this demonstrates very clearly that, should an incident have occurred, this site would have been very difficult for the emergencies to get to. The applicant also suggests in her response that she was unaware of the noise being heard further afield by the neighbouring villages. So I'm not just talking about neighbouring homes, neighbouring villages. Her response doesn't necessarily reflect the truth, that this information was put on social media, so in public, and rather than responding sympathetically to these complaints, to rectify the situation by toning down the sounds, Tog Farm family responses were calling them complainants Karens. So I don't think that was particularly professional. And of course, the noise continued throughout the summer, only being stopped by a noise abatement order. Here in Rudbury, we are a rural village. We boast a wonderful rural environment and rural setting, and we want to be remembered for the quality time people have and quality experience they have in our rural setting, and that any local businesses should be delivered by reputable business ethics. I'm concerned that Ms. Lewis is suggesting that now that our countryside is going to be lit up, completely lit up, which again raises environmental concerns. Also, as you can see from all of us who are joining you today here, broadband Wi-Fi is very difficult. You freeze regularly on this meeting today. It's difficult to get that. So to be able to get CCTV, where I can just about get it around my home, to get it down those fields is going to be highly difficult to achieve that. So I think the safety of anybody in those fields is going to be of grave concern to me. Thank you. Sorry it took so long.
Okay, Ms. Garland. Any questions, please? I see Councillor Cushin. You have a question?
You know me, Chair, I always got a question. Yes, I'd like to ask Ms. Garland, in regards to the, what's the word I'm looking for? Animosity that residents received in regards to any complaints they might have made. Have these been recorded and reported to the police?
There's been a number of complaints that came through to the community council at the time. All of these things have been provided to the police, to all of the departments in CCBC, and to, oh God, there was a long list. So yes, they've all been recorded and they've all been provided.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Don't appear to be any other questions. Thank you, Ms. Garland.
Yep.
I go to Mr. Garland now, please. Oh, sorry, just a moment. Councillor Adams.
Sorry, Mr. Garland won't be attending. And can I give my apologies because I've got an appointment I have to disappear to.
Okay, yeah, just Councillor Adams has a question at the moment.
Okay, I'll stay for. Sorry for that.
Sorry there, my mobile phone came on just as I put my microphone on, so I cancelled that. Sorry, Chair. Just for Mr. Garland, up until February, I think she said that she was a member of the Community Council, and of course we've got lots and lots of things from the Community Council. Has she been active in reporting any complaints to the police as an individual since then? Just to add up to top up all of those complaints that she was a party to.
I contributed today as me as a resident and neighbour. Everything else prior to that was through the Community Council.
Just wanted to check that, Ms. Garland. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Do you need me anymore now?
Thank you. Well, if you have to go, yes, I think that'll be okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Mr. and Mrs. Smith. You in attendance now?
Yes. Thank you, Chair.
You can give a representation, please. Mr. Smith, is it?
Yes, Mr. Smith. Thank you. Thank you very much. We trust that the council members have had a chance to consider our representations, which are made on page 105 to 110 of the bundle. We both believe that these are a true and accurate reflection of events that have taken place at Tog Farm over the previous year. These events have had a significant negative impact on the enjoyment of our home and garden in what was once a peaceful rural setting. Many of the points that have been made duplicate our own, and they've already been addressed. As neighbouring residents of Tog Farm, we express our concerns in relation to all the salient points: prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, and protection of children from harm. Many of these areas, as you might appreciate, overlap, but many of these areas have been already highlighted. And when you look at the pack, you can see possibly what we mean when you see the photographs of what we've had to put up with during the last year. When we made our representations, obviously the applicant has a chance to respond, but what we found very strange was the actual response which was made to our representations. That's shown on page 116. Basically, stating that she's been advised by her solicitors to request legal advice from the council department is sought prior to the hearing for following reasons. States comments are incorrect and untrue beyond any reasonable doubt. I don't believe that is the case. This morning there's been many people giving their own opinions of the way Tog Farm Limited is run. Looking at the response made by the applicant on page 116, it states that Bridget Lewis is listed as Charlotte Lewis on Company's House. But as you know, Company's House requires accurate details of the surname. And for Tog Farm Limited, Charlotte Lewis is given as the surname. So if any search was made on Companies House for whatever companies the applicant is attached to, it would come up as one company, surname Charlotte Lewis. However, if you were to use the true surname, Lewis, Bridget Lewis, you will find another 2 companies which were incorporated around about exactly the same time as Tog Farm Limited, all within 6 months. Gaia Group Limited in the main high street in Caerphilly Town Centre. Then 3 months later, I believe, around about 3 months later, there was Tog Farm Limited. Then about 3 months later, Blues Baby Boutique in the main street of Caerphilly. Both, I believe, these companies are struggling. One dissolved, and the other one facing a strike off. Apart from that, moving on from that, the comment which was made, which a neighbour of ours, Richard Jenkins, has corroborated this morning, was that hello, can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
Chair, I think Mr. Smith has lost connection.
Yeah.
I want to give him a moment. Chair, we're just going to give him a quick call to see if we can be of assistance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Here you go,
Back.
Chair. They're coming back in now. Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Hello, very sorry about that. I got a connection difficulty.
Okay.
Can I continue?
Yes, please. Regarding this application, yeah.
Yes, regarding the application, I with my representations, I was advised either to enlarge on the comment I made or possibly redact it. In the order of simplicity, I redacted the comment I made, but then.
What's he saying?
Harry.
Chair, sorry, if I can be of assistance, I can see Mr. Smith is also joined by telephone, so perhaps to assist him, if he leaves the meeting on Teams and just joins by telephone. Sorry, Mr. Smith, can you hear us now?
Hello?
Hi, Mr. Smith, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you.
Right, Mr. Smith, we can still hear you on telephone. So if you're happy to continue through telephone, you can carry on addressing the committee through telephone. Obviously, you won't be able to see everyone, but you'll still be able to hear us and we can hear you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Sorry about that again, connection difficulty. Yes, so the applicant then has put the word which was in my representations back in, which I redacted. But as you understand, my name Jenkins has clarified exactly the incident which occurred regarding the Great Dane dog attack. These are not isolated incidents. That's the problems with the dogs, and especially as we have young grandchildren living here, it's a constant worry. But as you can appreciate, the fields are quite open, and the dogs very often end up in our property and in the garden. There's with a number of dogs, there's barking and howling, which goes on for hours on end. And the applicant has turned around on page 116 and said that we were previously reported for our dog being a noise nuisance. Well, quite large, the local council deemed the dog to be considered a nuisance, and relevant action was taken, and the dog is not the case. We were looking at a basset hound for a couple of weeks when the owners went away on holiday, and the first incident, we didn't know at the time, but it was an anonymous report. They reported us on a noisy dog, and they believed that the dog was taken away. Well, it wasn't. It went back to the owners when they came back from holiday. So this is not in retaliation to any previous incidents. Looking at the rest of the comments, several muddy tracks. I've not made this. The rough tracks I talked about. There's tracks. There's the rough track going down from Pentering Green Road. Going down, there's another track which runs down to the cattle sheds. There's further tracks which running further over to the fields. To give you an example, when Western Power had to work on a pylon in the fields, they had great difficulty accessing the site. In fact, they had a temporary road to go down there just to access the site, so the electricity pylon to replace insulators. So it's not an easy site to access. So any emergency services, fire engine, ambulance, would be able to make it the way down there, especially if you had somebody who needed urgent medical treatment as far away as the fields where the old Cray Valley paintworks are. The reason for us putting in these representations is not neighbour disputes, as the applicant suggests. And we are not using these representations to sabotage their business, they have said. We have lived as neighbours quite amicably in the same properties for nearly 30 years. Well, it'll be 30 years next year. But all these problems just developed a few years ago when Miss Lewis returned from working in London. So I hope if you have a chance to read through the representations we've made, and to the best of our knowledge, and the true reflection of what's been occurring. And I hope that the decision is made to refuse this application, as I don't believe it's a suitable premises at all for any glamping or events or anything of that nature. That concludes my representations.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Councillor Cushion, you have a question?
Yeah, I do, Chair. Just to clarify with Mr. Morgan, really, in the event we do grant or don't grant the licence, there's nothing that we can do regarding the larger events that take place, is it, at the Tog farm at the moment, Mr. Morgan, because that is classed as unlicensed. Am I correct in thinking that? Something you said earlier on in the meeting?
Okay, today, obviously, your consideration is to determine the application before you, Councillor Cushin. So the application before you today is in relation to the site for the sale of alcohol and the showing of film. The larger events, as you've indicated, bring your own, as they've been referred to. Those events are not subject to the control of the Licensing Act. So someone could bring alcohol onto a field. Obviously, it's the landowner's will or responsibility to allow them access to that field. There are other statutory controls which will address events of that nature, whether that's through noise, nuisance or antisocial behaviour. But the Licensing Act per se would not necessarily address some of those issues which have happened before. Is there a further question? I suppose I can perhaps try and assist where you go in terms of if this.
Well, basically, what I'm trying to establish is what's gone on in the past regarding the larger events where they bought their own alcohol. They had permission from the owners of the farm to have these sort of pop-up festivals, if you want of a better word. That isn't actually under our control, apart from it being noise, nuisance, etc. Regarding this current application, it's a totally separate thing moving forward.
It is a separate thing. I think from what I can gather from the resident representations in particular is their confidence in management concerns in relation to any new venture. If I were to put it like that, then I think that from what I can gather from the hearing and from the comments that's been submitted as part of the representations, the concern is that events have happened. I think that is accepted. And I think the resident concerns is, will the applicant, can the applicant control the activities if a license were to be granted? I think that's the concerns of the residents, and I think that is a consideration, obviously, that you as a panel will have then going forward, is to consider that information. Obviously, you have advice from the legal advisor, but I think that is my understanding of what I'm hearing through these comments this morning, if that helps.
Yes, it does certainly help, and I do understand, you know, the representations from the residents, but I don't know what the obviously the legality regarding these proposed and possible failing ventures are under different names, and whether or not the legal situation, because I wouldn't know that regarding Companies House and registration.
Well, it's perhaps something we can go through in deliberations.
Okay, no problem, Todd.
Whether the applicant's director has other companies may be relevant, but perhaps only marginally.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Olsen.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Smith. No other hands up.
Thank you very much.
Mrs. Smith, do you want to make a representation?
Just to say that the points we were making there was the representations we made, her responses tried to undermine them on things that we were saying were false. What we were just trying to prove there, that the things we did actually say were not false and can be backed up. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no questions for Mrs. Smith? No. Thank you. Then I go to Mr. Morgan, please, to sum up.
I'll try and keep this very, very brief, Chair, because I know that there's been a lot of information you've heard this morning, and I thank all parties for presenting that information to you. The applicant will have her opportunity to sum up shortly to capture her summing up points. In relation to members, then your determination, if I can take you back to the report and ask you to consider the relevant sections, in particular section 1, paragraph 1.8, in relation to your considerations of the licensing assessment and the job that you will have to do following this meeting in determining this application. I would direct members to the recommendation at 1.10, and you will have heard from the responsible authority, or two of them, who appear to indicate that they wish to maintain their objections to this application. They will clearly sum that up for you in a second. Members will have to consider whether the promotion of the licensing objectives and whether the applicant will be able to meet the same, and obviously considering all the information that you've had presented you in the bundle. It's important that I reference that there are some parties which did not attend but did make representations as part of during the 28-day consultation period process. They are contained within the report bundle. I know you would have had regard to them, but I would direct you back that they are there for your information. So, Chair, yes, there's an amount of, after everyone sums up their position, you will retire, and I will invite you then to consider all the information that you've heard this morning, but also contained in the report. Okay, thank you, Chair, for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Can I ask Dean Pugh, Environmental Health, please, to sum up?
Hello, Chair. Yeah, summing up from my perspective, from a health and safety perspective, as I say, we still object to the application for the fact is sufficient evidence hasn't been submitted to demonstrate that the tracks are in a suitable condition, and we have no sort of documentation received from Ms. Lewis to demonstrate what they are putting in effect to resolve the matters which we have raised our concerns with. So as it stands, we still object to the application.
Thank you. Mrs. Dix, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. In relation to the licensing authority's representations, I would reiterate what Mr. Pugh said, and I would say that my objections still stand to the application in relation particularly to the public safety objective. As you will see from the report, when our visit was undertaken, ground conditions were poor, and whilst Ms. Lewis has provided some photographs which are referred to in pages 117 to 120, showing that some works have been completed, clearly a large area still not been, works has not been undertaken. Obviously, she has referred to ongoing works, but at this present time, as I said, when the application has been considered today, the ground conditions, in my opinion, with Mr. Pugh's, are that it's still unsafe and obviously would compromise the public safety licensing objective. I will refer you, if you are of a mind, to grant the licence today, however, of the conditions that I have referred to, which I believe would ensure effective and responsible management should they become conditions of licence. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Dix. Mr. Christian Jennings, please.
Hi, Chair.
Sum up, please.
Thank you. Yeah, so Environmental Health Pollution Control have no objections as a responsible authority. We have, however, proposed some conditions that, if the licence was to be granted, would go some way to reducing the impact on public nuisance. I would also ask the committee to require the applicant to submit a location plan which is befitting of the site as a whole and also shows the relevant licensable areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Keown, please. Sum up, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've nothing really to add from what I told the committee earlier. The recommendations from myself and from Child Protection been accepted by the applicant. And I don't think there's anything else I can add in relation to the specific licensing objective, and that is the protection of children from harm.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Mr. Jenkins, please, to sum up?
Hi. I go back to what I said earlier on. The noise is, the business isn't conducive to the area that we live in. It's a public nuisance. The noise is intrusive beyond reason, and it's having a major impact on my life, even to the point that I even considered whether or not I want to live here anymore. So I stand by what I say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Garland, I think, has left the meeting. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, would you like to sum up, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We just like to say that all the representations we've made previously and gone through a true and accurate version of what we believe has been going on and continues to go on, and undoubtedly it will be going on well into the summer, regardless, with large events, music festivals, hen nights, stag nights, all the rest of the parties and trimming. It is very much like party in a field, but we will hope to carry on. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Mr. Lewis, please, would you like to sum up?
Hi, yes, I would. I'm just going to keep my camera off, if that's okay, because my little boy's by here. I just wanted to touch on a few of the points obviously made during that time. Obviously, I've not been able to address anything since I think Dean was speaking. So I just want to, yes, sorry. So in terms of the ruts, that's something that is an ongoing ongoing project that we are dealing with. Obviously, I've sent some photos over of what we've done so far, but we are working towards doing that. It's not just my father. So if my father's actually broken his hip, so he's not the one taking out the work, as Jane Garland assumes. So it is being done by a contractor. In terms of walking from the area to the bar, we've been operating as a business now for over a year, and I've not had anybody walk from the bottom of the fields up, so that's not really a concern for us. The waterlog, so we have found that the waterlog has come from the cows, so we have Highland cattle, which we've realised after looking into it that they've caused a waterlog because they've dug down into the drainage area that's there. So that's currently being worked on. You'll note when the representatives from the council came, the cows were actually up on the yard. Yeah, up on the yard, so we can take out work. Obviously, lighting, there seems to be a concern with lighting being a pollution, but then also being a necessity. Whether or not we refer back to agricultural farming or any different farming, the farm is going to need light. I don't particularly see that as being a pollution. It's something that needs to be done. In terms of the police visits, yes, we have had 2 police visits, both of which were laughed off by the police. I think the police were called down for an illegal rave, and when they came, there was no action taken. They came down to site, they walked around, and they left. I've said in my application that myself, my father, and anyone working for Tog Farms more than happy to have their police records searched. There's no police records for any of us. There's been no cautions. As I said, we're more than happy for you to, for our records to be accessed. Social media, so obviously a few of the statements that have been made are about social media. I think we need to just look at the point, maybe not to believe everything that you read. Social media is a platform for us to obviously promote the business, but not everything on there is a matter of fact. For example, there was a complaint made, as I said, that we'd be welcoming tigers to the farm on April Fools, which I believe was reported. I think we need to take social media with a pinch of salt. Not everything that we put on there is relevant, is true. It is just a platform for us to express ourselves. It's not, it's not something we do all taken under oath. In terms of Miss Garland's point of COVID, whilst we've had National Resources Wales, so we've built up a really good relationship actually with Clive from National Resources Wales. We've never had anybody here, well, I've never had COVID. Whilst members of the family have had COVID, we've not had anybody in contact with them in the farmhouse. Nobody actually goes into the farmhouse. The main, obviously the objections from the residents, I do feel like a point is slightly being missed, that whether or not our application for this license is granted or not, we will still continue to trade. I understand that they feel they don't have any trust in us, which I completely understand from the events of last year. But by putting an application in, I have put myself up to be confined by certain restrictions. So although I appreciate that there's no trust between myself and the residents, by doing so, I have to, if this was granted, abide by these restrictions that are put in place. By not putting in an alcohol license, I could continue to trade. We could continue with the large events, as we have been doing. In terms of the 4x4 making more noise than anything, again, if we revert back to a normal farm, we'll be having tractors, JCBs and whatnot. That's, as far as I'm concerned, it's not particularly relevant. We don't have any ATVs on the farm. We did have a quad, and we have, my brother has a motorbike that's not used. All of the vehicles that are used on the farm are 4x4s. They're roadworthy, they've been MOT, they've been taxed. We've got a Mitsubishi L200 and two Mitsubishi Shoguns. My name on company's house is Bridget Georgina Charlotte Lewis, as that's my full name. That's what we have to provide. In terms of Mr. and Mrs. Smith pointing out that I've had two businesses, yes, I did. I moved back and I have Gaia Group Limited and Blues Baby Boutique Limited, both of which opened 3 months before COVID-19 started. So I think that sort of speaks for itself in terms of my capability to run a business. The Gaia ran for a year during the pandemic, which, I think, as I said, speaks for itself. In terms of the CCTV, I know Ms. Garland raised a concern that her CCTV wasn't particularly good. We have no problems with our CCTV, and the company that we use have assured us that a solar CCTV down the field would be it's something they do and is tried and tested. They have it on many different places. Western Power, I just want to touch on that comment. So Western Power, the way they actually had to make the track down was actually on the field. So they came during the winter time. And they actually had to put a road in on the field. It wasn't actually, they didn't have any problems getting everything down. They had problem driving to a pylon in the middle of a field, which was occupied by horses. Again, Ms. Garland's assumption that I've only just found out what permitted development is. I haven't by any means. It is something that I'm aware of, and I'm aware that we haven't been operating, illegitimately. We have been exercising our rights of permitted development. And in terms of my email to her, it was by no means asking for business advice. It was to help rebuild the relationship that we've had between myself and the residents. As Mr. Jenkins says, he's lived here for 18 years. My father's been a resident all of his life. He's 63. It's not... and he's had a good relationship with everybody in the local area. In terms of other people, my mother, for example, Mrs. Lewis, who doesn't have any involvement in the business, and anybody else that wants to raise concerns with Tog Farm, unfortunately that's out of my control. But myself and my father, who are directors of Tog Farm, have not made any comments towards anybody that have raised any complaints. I think if you actually look on the Drythan and Waterloo Facebook, the only response I've ever made to a Facebook group is when people were actually being quite abusive to the person who had made the comments, and I actually asked them to be respectful and I took into consideration their comments. Again, I just want to reiterate, by no means do we, not take responsibility for last year. We made a lot of mistakes last year. As I said, we had DJs, we had animals, animals interacting with children. We made a lot of mistakes and a lot of things that we didn't know we were doing wrong. In a lot of the comments, I think that a lot of the residents' reputations point out that the council have done nothing. I think it's fair to say that the council and myself have worked really closely together since opening in March 2021, and I think anybody from the council would appreciate that we've tried as best as we can to be compliant. We've put in the procedures to be compliant, and we've put in the procedures to be a sustainable business. But the bottom line is, whether or not this license is granted, it does not stop us from trading. All this license will do is control what we're able to do and give us, if anything, more control over the people that we have here. Yes, we have had a hen do. It wasn't of 18 people. We had a hen do of 14 people come here last week, because obviously the license still hasn't been granted and we still need to make a profit. And going forward, obviously, if the license is granted, we will be going down to we will be operating with just 10 people. Yeah, so I think that summarizes all of the points that have been made.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone for attending today, for the representations. Legal, please.
Thank you, Chair. In a moment, the Chair will ask all parties to hang up and the subcommittee will retire to discuss the application and the representations that they've heard today. I'll be there to offer legal advice and the committee clerk will also be present. The decision of the subcommittee will then be circulated by the licensing department within 5 working days of the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
You're on mute, Chair.
Thanks very much. Thank you all for attending and good day to you. Please can I ask all parties to leave the Teams meeting now by pressing the hang up button, and please can I ask committee services stop the recording.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.